This is the PRISM's first annual undergraduate research experience seminar. The three of us are mentors with PRISM. I'm Max Rogers.
I'm Corinne.
And so we have a number of speakers here with us today who are going to talk about the path they took to undergraduate research, probably a bit of what they're doing there, and advice for us as to what we should be doing in the future. And I think we're starting with Jose, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a quick note to everyone, there are some flyers sort of circling around. They've got a bit of information about the spring course on them, and they've also got information about the summer discovery project. So yeah, if you want to take a look at those.
And each of three things.
So Jose, I'll start off.
Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Jose Orozco. I'm in the graduating class of 2012, and I'm a biochemistry and mathematics major. And among other places, I've worked at the NIH, which is one of the biggest biomedical research institutes in the country, and Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center, which is a leading cancer-oriented hospital. So why do research? I think that every student that's graduating with a degree in basic science should do research at some point before graduating. For the simple reason that everything we know comes from research. And part of being in the basic science, part of being a student of basic science is to know how to create knowledge. So that's knowing the process, how to ask questions, how to design experiments to answer the questions. These are things you need to know as a student of basic science. So the best way to do it is the best way to know how to do something is to do it. So that sort of goes on trends of unleashing their experience. So how does it begin? How did it begin for me? Well, it starts really early. I mean, before you even start doing research, you know, people already have the right frame of mind. So I was always asking questions. When I was in high school, I decided to come to Northeastern and major in biology because for the very simple reason that I looked at, life, at humans, looked at, and I was so interested in how does this work? How does it come together and fit so nicely, to work in a certain way? And I asked a very basic question, which is, how does this work? That's it, right? If you do this, if you know how to ask questions, and the more you learn about something, the more specific the questions become, and you start asking questions in the right way, framing them in a very particular way. You start asking questions that maybe you can answer. And once you can do that, I mean, you're almost there, and you just need to have someone. If you're interested, then you just need someone to take you on, right? So I wanted to go through how I got started. What were my first steps? So as a biology major, they have us they give us tours for different labs, and I was assigned to go to Aaron Cram's lab. And I think Max, right? Is your name? I think Max toured this lab maybe last year. Yeah, I remember you. And Erin gave us a little tour of her lab, and she gave us a little talk about about her research. And she was really studying things that I was also interested in, because I wanted to understand how these different pieces come together to that give rise to phenomena in biological systems. So she was studying that. She was studying about molecular biology, studying how these different pieces, genes, proteins, whatever you call them, come together to achieve a certain function. And I got hooked. I was really interested. I emailed her after my freshman year. So my tour was in the beginning of my freshman year. I went through freshman year. I went back home over the summer. I didn't do anything. I had a summer job, but I didn't do anything, which I regret. And then I emailed her at the end of the summer saying, I'm coming into my second year. I'm going to take your genetics class. Do you have an opening in your lab? Can I go in and work? And I didn't know much of the science. I mean, I had taken introductory biology. I didn't know much of it. You don't need to start. But I was enthusiastic, and I had good grades. So she decided to take me on. Sometimes that's all you need. And so she took me on, and then once I was in, I never really left. I'm still there. It's been over 3 years now. I've done informal undergraduate research, which means you're taking courses and you're just doing research after class, before class, and between class, all the time. And I've also done directed studies, which is an opportunity you can do once you have a faculty who's willing to work with you. You can do a directed study and work with them and get credit for that. It reduces your your course load, so you can dedicate maybe more time to your research project. So I did that in the spring of '09. I also did a co-op there through the Maths Co-op Fellowship, Co-op Scholarship. And this is for people in life sciences or chemistry. And you apply, you write a proposal, and you send it in, and then there's a committee that meets and decides who gets awarded this co-op. And they don't fund your actual research, they fund you. They pay you a stipend, so some people need it. So and right now I'm still in the lab, I'm working on my thesis, and I'm working right now, so the topic is how actin-myosin networks, which is this huge network in the cell comprised of actin, one of the cytoskeletal proteins, and myosin, which is one of the major motor proteins in the cell that achieves movement of cells. But this network, in addition to moving the cell, can also respond to forces of the cell. So when forces are applied to a cell, cells are stretched, cells sense a lot of things as they migrate and move. And how this network can achieve the sensory of this motion of these forces, and then they change that mechanical input into a biochemical response. And that's the question that I'm involved in. Of course, my research topic is much less broad. I mean, this defines a whole field in cellular biology. So mine is looking at a particular group of genes and how they're regulated with mechanical. Okay, so once you're in, what happens? So it's up to you. You need to really learn the sciences, and this is where your courses will come into play. So undergraduate courses give good foundations to different fields, but students, once you're involved in research, or if you want to be involved in research, you're expected to go much more in depth into a specific topic of your interest. And it's not easy. I mean, you start reading from textbooks. Many times these textbooks will have references. You can go to start there. If you're interested in a particular thing, you can look it up. You can ask your professor for a certain reference to literature, and then you can start there if you want. And it's not easy. The first scientific paper that I read took me about 3 days to get through, and I understood maybe a quarter of what I read. But it's a skill you have to develop, and it's really important because it's how scientists communicate. So it's a really important skill to have, to be able to read a scientific paper in your field, right? And as you're reading scientific papers, you become accustomed to a certain way of thinking, a certain way of asking questions, and it's basically what the scientific method is. So this is a really important, critical part of doing research, is how to ask these questions. And then you start formulating your own interest and asking your own questions, and that's when you really are getting involved, and this is when you're really learning. And then you can ask something like, who is working on these questions? Who's writing these papers? And maybe can I work with this person? Can I email him? Is that something or her? That may be a way in. So I did, after I worked with, to go into this next slide, I wanted to say that, I've been working in this lab almost, every fall and spring, but in the summers I've always done summer research internships. And these are very common. There are a lot of them in the country. And this is the first one I did. This was in the summer of 2009. It was right after my sophomore year, so I had been in the lab for about 8 months. I applied to this program. It was in molecular biology. Erin Cram graduated, did her postdoc in Princeton, so she told me, hey, you have this summer program, maybe you'd be a good fit. So this is why I went. I worked with Paul Shettle, who's a fruit fly geneticist, and we were studying basically gene regulation in development, and specifically these boundary elements that are involved in the regulation of chromatin during development. And I was studying a protein complex that was required for the function of the boundary element, using these two hybrid which is a method that allows you to test for protein-protein interaction. And I put in the website here. This is a link to the website for the summer program. So these slides will be put up in the website. And then you can, if you're interested in molecular biology, so this is the molecular biology department, you can use this link and it will take you right into the application process and it'll tell you more about the program. They give you stipend and housing, so it's really great. The next summer, so last year, I worked at the National Institutes of Health. And the NIH summer internship, I should say that the other programs, I think they take sophomores and there's the juniors. So we didn't have any freshmen. I don't know if any freshmen go there, but this NIH summer internship program does hire a lot of freshmen, even high school students. And I was surprised with how many of them were. It's a 10-week program, an embedded stipend. You work with top researchers in the biomedical field. I work with Dr. Anthony Jetton, who is the head of the Laboratory of Respiratory Biology. And I was studying transcription factor called LIS3 and its role in certain cancers. And again, I provide here the link that you can go to if you're interested in biomedical research. This is really interesting. So again, they don't just have people who are studying cellular biology. They have across many disciplines people in the NIH doing different things. Of course, usually always tied in with biomedical research, but you can be an engineer, physicist, etc., and work at the NIH. And this last summer, I worked at Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center, and this is a great place to do research. I mean, they're the #2 hospital for oncology in the country, and again, they also have top researchers in the field. And I work with Dr. Lorenz Studer, and he does stem cell research. And I was working with one of my favorite topics, which is cellular reprogramming, which is how to get a cell that's already decided to take a certain fate, so a skin cell or another kind of cell, and revert it back to a stem cell. And this is one of my favorite topics. It's a huge field right now, and I had the opportunity to work in a lab trying to get some of these protocols going. And here's the link to the summer program. This is me presenting in the poster session at the end of the program. That's my poster. Okay, so these summer programs are available for everyone. The applications are free, so you can apply to them as many as you want, basically, as many as you can. You are your own advocate. I mean, so it's up to you. No one's going to hand this to you. If you don't have the experience yet, you want it, you really want it, you have to do the work. You're going to have to apply to these things. It's kind of a hassle. Each one will have their own essays. It's like applying to college, right? But if you do enough, if you apply to 25 or 30 of them, you're going to get somewhere. And I know people who've done that. And there are many opportunities here in Boston. So if you're limited to where you can be, there are many here in Boston, but you can apply anywhere in the country. And it is possible to do it after freshman year. So that's something that if you're a freshman and you want to do it, it's possible to do it. Okay, so I didn't pursue this. This is one of the things I regret. I would have done differently. And for example, the NIH is an example. Letters of recommendation. You have to a good idea, because many times when you apply to these programs, I think all of them that I apply, you require letters of rec. So build relationships with your professors, and it's not enough just to get an A. Try to be involved in class, and because it actually is a very critical part of the application. Make sure the professor knows you. Be involved with office hours, ask questions. So that's one thing you can do to build that. If you're not currently doing research, how do you get a good rec letter? That's one thing you can do. And don't be afraid to ask professors that you have right now in class if they're willing to have you work with them, because many professors are willing to take on young students like freshmen, sophomores, midlers, so they can train them and then they can actually produce something. So many professors would rather hire or take on a freshman or sophomore than an upperclassman for that reason. Okay, thanks for listening. And, are there any questions?
One question I had was when you went to these large institutes like the NIH or Sloan-Kettering, how did you connect up with specific researchers there?
So these summer programs, are well established, so you apply to the program itself.
Right.
Okay, so you don't, so for Sloan-Kettering, for example, I didn't contact Lorenz Suter, although I did know he worked there. So in the application, I said, I want to study this, which is, I basically put exactly, because I wanted to work in his lab, that's why I wanted to go there. So I said, I want to study this, this, and that, which was what he was studying. And then they ask you to rank your top choices. Where would you want to be placed? And I put at the top of my list, Lorenz Suter. So I was lucky enough that he was willing to take me on, because many times what will happen is you get accepted into the program. And after you accept the acceptance, then they send an email out to your top choice. And they say, listen, we have this student, he wants to work with you. These professors, I mean, they're really busy people many times, and they may not even respond. So you may not get into your top lab. Or you get somewhere else that's good. And if you go to a good institution like NIH, like Sloan-Kettering,
So what you're saying is it makes sense to do your homework first.
Yes.
See who is doing what at the place. And maybe even tailor your interests so you're an obvious fit for the guy who looks good to you.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Makes sense.
When I applied to Princeton as a sophomore, it's hard to come up with those specific interests if you don't really know. I went to Princeton because I applied there because the professor I was working for did a postdoc there and suggested it was a great place. So it's hard. I mean, when I applied as a junior, I had so much more of a specific interest in something. So it was easier for me to get because I had that specific interest. I want to go to your summer program because I want to work for him because I'm interested in that. So it sounds a lot better than, I mean, when I applied to Princeton, I didn't say I want to work for him. I said more of a college essay type personal statement. So yeah, if you can do your homework and find a specific researcher who you're interested in, your application's a lot stronger. That reason. Anyone else?
Well, I had one more comment I wanted to make.
Sure.
And that was about getting an A is not enough. So as somebody who's writing these letters, it makes my job really easy. If in class you're intellectually curious, you come out after class and say, I'd like to understand, where do we go with this? Okay, is there anything that I could do that would build on what we've got? Or I've got this question, does this make any sense? Those kinds of things make letters of recommendation, as I said, very easy to write.
Yeah. And those things play a big role when it comes to getting into these programs. Think about it. Okay. Thanks for listening. Good. Thank you.
That's okay.
This is Emily. Very impressive.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, so my name is Emily Batt. I'm a senior. I'm very excited to share my path on undergraduate research with you, and I think you'll probably see a lot of overlap with what Jose has said. But I'm from Merrimack, New Hampshire, and I'm studying physics. I'll be graduating this spring. Rewind a little bit to 2007. I had just graduated high school, and I was really excited, but I did not know what I was going to do at all. So I was a little panicked. But I knew I was coming to Northeastern, and I just wasn't quite sure what I was going to study yet. I was thinking a little bit of everything. So I guess the obvious choice for my major was to be undeclared. But that turned out to be really great for me because I got to try out a lot of different things. And my first experience in research was actually in the humanities. I studied a topic called the Stadia, which is the melancholy of 17th century monks. So not science at all, but very interesting. And I really like to get into the very heavy reading, do a lot of analysis on the text, and do a lot of writing. And I like the autonomy of the research. So it was a really interesting project. But it came time for me to choose a major. And I had been thinking about physics. I just wasn't too confident in the math. I was a little nervous about it, but I knew that physics could really explain a lot of different phenomena. It could tie together a lot of different disciplines. So I thought, there are a lot of opportunities, why not? I'll give it a shot. But it came time to find my first research experience, and I was a little nervous because all I had done was study really sad monks. So I didn't quite know what to do. But I took the advice of one of my professors who recommended the research experience for undergraduate grants. Those are probably what Jose was alluding to, which are grants funded by the National Science Foundation that are usually 10-week summer programs that happen all over the country. And at a ton of different universities and a ton of different topics. You get guidance from faculty. It's kind of like a mentorship. There's tons of areas you can study, but the caveat is that they're in high demand because students from all over the world are trying to get into these, so you really do need to apply to a lot, especially if you've only studied monks. So I was one of those people who applied for 23 of them, and I was offered one, and it was perfect. It was the very last one I applied for, so I was lucky. So for the summer of 2009, I moved to Oregon State University and did research in physical oceanography. I worked with Professor Jim Lurzak. He's at OSU, and my project was to analyze the evolution of a certain type of subsurface wave. And it was really cool because I got to look at the data that had already been collected, and then I got to go on a 10-day research cruise and collect my own data, and then I got to present my results at a national conference. So in a nutshell, internal waves are subsurface gravity waves, just like you would see, crashing on the beach, but below the surface. And they're important to study because they carry a lot of material, and we need to understand how those waves might transport waste or sediment or biota. So I was using data collected from hull-mounted instruments and turning that binary data into images of waves. So this is a wave that was moving towards shore for about 12 hours. So that's one picture of a wave. And it was a lot of fun to work as a member of a scientific team. The cruise was so interesting. We dumped fluorescent dye in the ocean, so that's Gatorade colored stuff is actually fluorescent dye. And we watched how the waves carried the dye. Beneath that, I'm putting diaper cream on one of our instruments so that seaweed wouldn't grow on it. The zinc stops the seaweed. And those are some of the images that I had by the time I had looked at all the data. So after that program, it was time to go back to school. And as a part-time job on top of classes, I decided to try to do some more research. And I joined a program called the Advanced Program at Northeastern. It's another NSF program occurring at universities all over the country, and it's aimed at increasing the number of female faculty in STEM fields, just kind of making it a more welcoming place for female faculty. It was a cool place to work because you had engineers and scientists doing research side by side with sociologists, so it was interesting to see the social side of scientific discipline. And following that program, it was time to find my next co-op. So I applied for another summer program, something called the Steamboat Summer Scholars Program. Every single year there's one Northeastern student who works at Dana-Farber and is funded by the Steamboat Foundation. And you actually work with, or you live with 13 other students who are working totally different internships. Some are in New York, some are in Boston, but you get together about every weekend. And there's also a very generous grant of $12,000 for the 10-week program. So still time to apply. Middlers and juniors can apply, so if you're a freshman or sophomore, definitely keep it in mind. You can be any major at all and apply for the Dana-Farber job. And in addition to doing research, you can also participate in some leadership development experiences through the Steamboat Foundation. So this is me with James Watson, one half of Washington Creek. It's pretty cool to meet him. And at Dana-Farber, I was in a computational biology lab, a cancer systems biology lab, and I was looking at how protein interactions actually using the same yeast-2 hybrid method, how those networks can explain the development of disease, and looking at the web of interactions of proteins in the whole body, and trying to see, well, what happens when one protein gets mutated? Does it knock out all of its interactions, or are some interactions preserved? And it was an interesting lab to work in because you're looking at these tiny molecules from a very systemic approach, very global approach, and there's a lot of computational biologists and computer scientists working right next to biologists on the lab bench. So I had two projects there, looking at mutations in proteins and trying to find alleles to test on the lab bench. These were the 3 mentors I worked with there. And I liked that job because it exposed me to the area of network science, the idea that you can look at a number of different systems with the same kind of computational approach. And while I was at a conference relating to network science, I met Cesar Hidalgo. He was actually just starting a new group at the MIT Media Lab, and I needed something to do for that fall following the steamboat summer. So I kind of just reached out to him and said, hey, I have some experience in systems biology and networks. I really like what you're doing. Do you have any need for an undergraduate research assistant? And luckily he did. So for the fall of 2010, I was looking at economic development from a networks-based approach, trying to see how two products in the global economy could be related, and whether using a networks representation can explain why countries develop so fast, or why some get stuck and really can't develop. And it was a lot of coding, a lot of writing in MATLAB to make simulations. And I'm on my final co-op now, so maybe you're wondering, can research experience translate to industry jobs? And I would say definitely. I'm working at a product development company right now called Fikst. It's in Woburn, Mass. And it's basically an engineering consulting company that does all sorts of things to help get products to market faster for client companies. So every day I'm brainstorming, or maybe I'm sketching new ideas, doing a lot of CAD and 3D modeling, which I had never done before, doing a lot of prototyping. We have a 3D printer in-house. Sometimes you're building simulations to test ideas for products, and studying material properties. So this is just a sampling of some of the products that my company has made. We have a body buffer, a kitty litter box, a loop that controls PowerPoint presentations, and a tool that puts your golf ball on the tee. So these are just some of the consumer products that we do, but we actually mostly do biomedical products. So here's a sample of an instrument development process. A company comes to you and says, well, we need a product that does X, Y, and Z. So we have an idea, we build a very rough prototype, go to Lowe's, get some 2x4s. The next step after that would be to 3D print the idea, and after that you move to injection molding. So by the time you finish, you have a very nice, white, shiny product. And what you just saw was actually part of a system called the Pippin Prep system. It's sold by Sage Science, and it's connected to what I've been doing mostly there, which is a system that makes gel electrophoresis automated. So the parts that you just have to do by hand, like using an X-Acto knife to cut out pieces of agarose gel, is now all completely automated. So it takes out hours of labor and just turns it into minutes of labor. So working there, I think, has shown me that research experience is really transferable. All the skills that you get in a lab can move directly to a company, especially if you're working in R&D. But some tips, I think, would be honest and eager. Especially as an undergraduate, you're not expected to know everything, which is the best part about doing research as an undergrad. You can say, I don't care what's going on, and you have people there to help you, and that's how you learn, and that's how you get better. So as long as you're eager and excited about what you're doing, that's all you need. Keep notes. You're going to forget how you did things, but if you have a notebook, then you'll remember. Definitely maintain your writing skills. No matter what you're doing, you're going to need to write about it. So keep that up. Cast a wide net. I would say it's important to try out a lot of different things. Don't worry about being pigeonholed in one area. It's never too late to say, well, I did this, but now I want to move on to something new. Talk to the grad students. They're an awesome resource, especially if you think you might want to go into that field. Talking to the grad students can help you figure out if you do. And be resourceful and network. Sometimes that seems a little scary or abstract, but it can literally mean just sending an email and saying, I'm interested in what you do. Can we talk about it? And definitely ask early for your recommendations. You want to give everyone ample time to write them. And that's it. Any questions? Awesome. Thanks.
Well, are you still fearful about mathematics?
I've gotten a lot better, and I've now embraced the difficulty. It's very difficult, but it's very rewarding, and I'm not fearful anymore, that's for sure. Yeah.
So you mentioned that product that you showed is sold by another company.
Yeah.
So Fikst, they develop the product and then they sell the patent.
It's actually, we're approached by companies. We're essentially an engineering consulting firm, so companies will come to us. And sometimes they have a concrete idea of what they want or need, or they've maybe already started on something, but other times it's just, sometimes they say, well, we have a product that works really well, but this one little component is broken. So we get the full range, you know, sometimes we're starting from scratch and sometimes we're not.
Could you say some more about Project Advance?
Yeah.
Is it open for all people in math, science, and engineering, or?
So the work that they do is tailored towards increasing the number of female faculty in those fields,
Yeah.
But they always have students there working. I know they have a number of work study students, and they might have positions open that aren't work study. But I was helping them conduct focus groups on the importance of international collaboration. So kind of just there to, you know, help facilitate those, and also work on a project looking at publication patterns. So that was 2009, and it's a 5-year grant, so it's definitely still ongoing. They're doing a lot, but I'm not sure where those projects stand now.
What do you plan to do after you graduate?
Good question. It's the golden question. I've put out a couple applications for graduate school, but I definitely want to work in product development. I really like that it's project-based. As you can see, I've kind of jumped around a lot, so it's nice to be able to really dive into something, learn it, you know, forwards and backwards, and then be able to move on and do something totally new. I like that process of learning from scratch, I guess. So I think product development is a good way to get that throughout a whole career. So looking into programs for that, and maybe working a little bit before.
What was the most challenging part of getting into research or doing research?
The most challenging part, and I still find it challenging, is managing the pace of the work, I guess. Oftentimes in research you're working very independently. You might not be checking in with the professor very often, so you really need to set like marks for yourself to hit. Or I know for me it's sometimes just making a to-do list and making sure I'm, you know, moving at a reasonable pace, because it's easy to get sidetracked or to I don't know, to spend too much time on one thing. So I think when you're working by yourself, that's definitely a skill you develop, and something I'm still working on. The hardest part of getting into research, I think, is getting your first research experience. Because once you say that you've done scientific research, it's a lot less of a gamble on you, I guess. Professors know that you have certain skills needed to do research successfully, but you have to get your foot in the door first, which is why I say, you know, take the time to apply to 25 of those programs, because if one pans out, then that's all you need. But it's definitely a huge time investment in the beginning. A lot of essays. Great, thanks.
All right. So my name is Byun, and that is me a year ago. So this is my presentation on how I got into research. So brief intro. I grew up in Sunnyside, Queens, and it's a great place, very diverse, a lot of science involved. There's the Museum of Science, and that's what got me into science. That was my favorite subject, and I excelled in it. So I knew I wanted to do something in the sciences early on. But then, and then I, decided to go into air and space because I thought that was cool, and, it was just really, it's really like, you know, I don't know, manly, I don't know. But I struggled in math, you know, for most of my life, and it basically kind of hindered my goals from pursuing this more. But I love, you know, planes and machines so much that I just decided to stick to it and overcome this struggle. So then I got into college. I started out as a physics major, but then I moved to mechanical engineering. I decided that I wanted something more hands-on, and that's why I'm in engineering now. So I still struggled in calculus because I didn't really have the best math background. But you know, I persevered, and you know, I started to learn from, you know, the professors here at Northeastern, and I worked through it, and then I finally started to get a little good at it. And then, you know, that's when things started to turn around. And yeah, so then I journeyed into research. So I did my, so when I was looking into co-op, I didn't really want to go into industry first. I knew I wanted to go into research, and I didn't want to, I basically did not want to do industry. So I started looking around, and that's when I enrolled in PRISM course, and because they had a bunch of flyers that said you can do research, and it was great. So I did my first co-op at the Action Lab, which a lot of you are familiar with, and that's where I started my research journey. So the Action Lab. So a lot of you may already know this, but basically, you know, the Action Lab studies the interactions between brain and basically human movements, and they try to understand how the body coordinates these movements. So basically, that is more or less what the Action Lab studies. And I got into a field called control systems. And with the Action Lab, I work with the biological aspect of control systems, specifically with humans. So then now I'm going to explain my research. So basically, in everything, there's some sort of time delay when there's a coordinated movement. You know, when a human grabs a cup of coffee and, you know, drinks it, there's some sort of time delay that the body has to deal with when the brain coordinates the movement. So basically, I wanted to go into research something with automated vehicles, unmanned automated vehicles, called UAVs. And there's a time delay associated with that as well. And I wanted to study, well, basically, so since I wanted to study that, Dagmar Stern, the director of the lab, tasked me with trying to figure out a way on how we can study the time delays in humans and how we coordinate movement, such as dancing, and then later apply that to robotic systems. Yeah. So at the Action Lab, I did a lot of programming, which is fun, and I programmed that device, which is called a Haptic Master, and that basically creates a virtual environment, so that, and basically you can program, you know, different variables in the environment like gravity and whatnot, and then you can measure the force, distance, velocities of human movements. So that's how we collected data, and we introduced time delays in how the system reacts compared to the motions that the humans input into the system. I also did some programming on that tablet, which Dagmar Stern had specific purposes for, and I did a lot of MATLAB data analysis. So, and I also got to attend lectures and seminars through my research. Basically, I was able to go to a neuroscience conference in San Diego last year, and it was It was a great time. I got to present. I didn't have anything published, but I did get to talk about some other projects that I worked on in conjunction with the lab members. And I also, yeah, so basically there was a bunch of talks at MIT and BU I participated in, and there was basically something called the Action Club, which discusses papers in the field of human motor control. And yeah, it was great. So, yeah, and I also did some, you know, I did some design work using my mechanical engineering background for some lab equipment at the X Lab. So that all basically gave me sort of a lot of skills and assets that I needed to go into industry. So for my second co-op, which I'm currently on, I decided to do my co-op at Draper Laboratories. And my job title there is a System Integration and Test Engineer. So I basically deal with anything that needs to be tested on and basically put together and whatnot. So we work on the Trident ballistic missile program, and it's basically a big missile that comes out of the submarine and does cool stuff. So yeah, so like I said before, I used a lot of problem-solving skills that I obtained from my research experiences that I need to apply at Draper Laboratories. Basically, you know, with one of the main things I do there is programming, and I write MATLAB programs that simulate and analyze data from guidance systems, and I use my research experience doing the same thing with human subjects, and I apply that to what I do at Draper. I also basically implement some of the same techniques to solve problems. Yeah, I basically said that. And then one of the main differences is that at Draper, I started writing tons of code. When I was doing research, I wrote a couple hundred lines of code. Now I'm writing a couple thousand lines of code. So it's, you know, it's very different, it's very intense, but research is what prepared me for that. I'm also doing some design work. I design test equipment to hold and basically hold and test missile equipment for flash X-ray radiation tests. Basically, they take the guidance system and they flash it with X-rays to see if it'll survive. And I have to design the equipment that houses that so they can test the equipment. And I was given a lot more responsibilities. Basically, they tasked me with buying all the materials and doing all the purchasing, and you know, it's kind of overwhelming when you need to buy $1,000 worth of equipment and you don't know, you know, you can't really say to them, oh, I bought the wrong thing. You know, that's not gonna really fly well with them. But so yeah, I do that, and you know, one of the greatest experiences out of this was that I had the chance to work with machinists, and the reason why I value this experience a lot is because you can design the greatest product there is, but there's a certain limitation when it comes to making it. So there are certain things that can be machined that you might not know of, and you know, if you don't take that into account, basically there's a lot of problems that come out of it. So I got to learn firsthand what can be done, what can't be done, and it helped me, you know, basically, it helped me with my design skills. And yeah, so I also got a lot of hands-on experience. I learned how to solder electrical components and use machining equipment. So, advice. So yeah, I might have gone a little fast, but I apologize. So, yeah, so one of the things I would recommend is to apply for research positions early. And there's a lot of research positions available through NSF, through the school, and through, government agencies like NASA and the Department of Energy. So I'd recommend that you guys apply to them early. Second, as many of the previous presenters have said, build a relationship with your professors. They'll help you to get recommendations. They'll provide, a lot of pathways to research. And it's always good to just build that relationship so that you can sort of get in the field. And third, enroll in the PRISM 1 credit course. That's, how I got started, and I think that'll be a good way for you guys to get started. And my last piece of advice is consider pursuing an advanced degree. What I've learned over the years is that basically a bachelor's is starting to become very common. And at companies like Draper or even Fikst, at Draper specifically, 45% of the employees at the company have their masters. And I think about 25 to 30% only have their bachelor's. So they're starting to hire more people with masters because a bachelor's is starting to become very common, and it's not enough for what companies are looking for.